Testing, testing. The subcommittee will come to order, and I want to welcome all of our very distinguished panelists and guests to this hearing this afternoon. And I'd like to begin with an opening statement, and then I'll yield to my two distinguished colleagues if they would like to make any opening statements. This hearing is the second in a series probing the question of whether maintaining access to China's lucrative education market undermines the very values that makes American universities great, including academic freedom. This hearing is timely for three reasons: the growing number of satellite or branch campuses started by the U.S. universities in China, the record numbers of Chinese students, 275,000 estimated, enrolling in U.S. universities and colleges in China each year, bringing with them nearly $10 million in a year in tuition and other spending, and the recent efforts by the Communist Party of China to regain ideological control over universities and academic research. Official Chinese government decrees prohibit teaching and research in 7 areas, the so-called 7 taboos, or 7 silences, including universal values, press freedom, civil society, citizens' rights, criticism of the party's past, neoliberal economics, and the independence of the judiciary. All of these so-called 7 taboos are criticized as Western values, which begs a very significant and important question: are U.S. colleges and universities compromising their images as bastions of free inquiry and academic freedom in exchange for China's education dollars? Some may defend concessions made at the cost of, as the cost of doing business in an authoritarian or dictatorship, such as in China. Maybe a university decides that it won't offer a class on human rights in China. Maybe they won't invite a prominent dissident or a fellow or visiting lecturer. Maybe they won't protest when a professor is denied a visa because of his or her work that is critical of a dictatorship. Maybe such compromises are rationalized as necessary to not offend a major donor or for the greater good of maintaining access. If U.S. universities are only offering Chinese students and faculty a different name on their diploma or paycheck, is it worth the costs and the compromises and the concessions? Perry Link, the eminent China scholar, argued during our last hearing in this room just a few months ago that the slow drip of self-censorship is the most pernicious threat to academic freedom, and it undermines both the recognized brands of our major universities as well as their credibility. Self-censorship may be the reason why NYU terminated the fellowship of a world-class human rights activist and hero, Chen Guangchen. As the NYU faculty said in their letter to the Board of Trustees, the circumstances surrounding the launch of the NYU satellite campus in Shanghai and the ending of Chen's residence created a, quote, public perception, accurate or otherwise, that NYU made commitments in order to operate in China. Again, begs another question: did NYU make any commitment or in any way fashion their response to Chen's staying at NYU? Let the record show that we had invited NYU's president or faculty some 16 times to testify before this committee without success. However, we are very, very pleased that Jeffrey Lehman, the Vice Chancellor of the NYU Shanghai campus, is indeed here with us today. On a personal note, I spent a considerable amount of time with Chen Guangchen when he first came to the United States and have continued that friendship ever since. Though NYU offered him important sanctuary, he was, in my opinion, treated very rudely at times, particularly when it was clear that he would not isolate himself on campus. And that included times when I invited him to join Speaker Boehner and Nancy Pelosi at a joint press conference to hear from Chen Guangchen about his beliefs about human rights in China, and it was a totally bipartisan effort, and yet that was not looked at very favorably. Though NYU offered, as I said, NYU officials and others worked hard to cordon off access to Chen, even on the days that he came. I was literally moved to the side so I wouldn't be able to have access to him, and that's after holding 4 hearings, including 2 in this room, when we got him on the phone when he was in a hospital in Beijing, and hooked him up right here at this microphone, and he made his appeal to the American public and to the press that he would like to come to the United States. Reuters and the Wall Street Journal also reported that there was concern that Chen was too involved with so-called anti-abortion activists, Republicans, and others, which would fit me as a description, because I am very pro-life. We may never know if NYU experienced persistent and direct pressure from China to oust Chen from his NYU fellowship, or whether they sought to isolate him in order to keep Chen's story out of the 2012 presidential elections, as Professor Jerry Cohen has said in an interview at the time. Certainly there is some interest here, as Hillary spent a whole chapter in her book detailing the events of Chen's escape and exile in the United States, which, when Chen Guangchen's book came out, certainly was not the same story being told by both. Or maybe there wasn't any pressure at all, just self-censorship to keep in Beijing's good graces during the final stages of opening the NYU Shanghai campus. While we are not here to exclusively focus on the sad divorce of Chen Guangchen and NYU, but his ousting begs the question, is it possible to accept lucrative subsidies from the Chinese government or other dictatorships for that matter, and operate campuses on their territory and still preserve academic freedom and other values that make America's universities great? I'm sure there are those here today who say they can, and reference an oral assurance they receive from the government or any agreement they sign, which is often kept secret with the host government. The real answer appears to be much more murky. Foreign educational partnerships indeed are important endeavors for students, collaborative research, cultural understanding, and maybe even for the host country in some sense. The U.S. model of higher education is the world's best. American faculty, fellowships, and exchange programs are effective global ambassadors. We must all seek to maintain that integrity. It is the interest of the United States to do so, and particularly when it comes to China. Nevertheless, if U.S. colleges and universities are outsourcing academic control, faculty and student oversight, or curriculum to a foreign government, can they really be the islands of freedom in the midst of authoritarian states or dictatorships? Are they places where all students and faculty can enjoy the fundamental freedoms denied them in their own country? These questions we ask today are not abstract at all. The Chinese government and the Communist Party are waging a persistent, intense, and escalating campaign to suppress dissent, purge rivals from within the party, and regain total ideological control over the arts, media, and universities. The campaign is broader and more extensive than any other in the past 20 years. Targets include human rights defenders, the press, social media, and the internet, civil rights lawyers, Tibetans, Uyghurs, and religious groups, Falun Gong, NGOs, intellectuals and their students, and government officials, particularly those allied with former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin. Chinese universities have been targeted as well. The recently issued Communist Party Directive Document 30 reinforces earlier warnings to purge Western-inspired notions of media independence, human rights, and the criticism of Mao Zedong. In a recent speech reported by the New York Times, President Xi Jinping urged university leaders to, quote, keep a tight grip, ideological work in higher education, never allow singing to the tune contrary to the party, never allowing eating the Communist Party's food and then smashing the Communist Party's cooking pots, his words. Will anyone at NYU or Fort Hays or Johns Hopkins or Duke, for that matter, be allowed to smash any Chinese Communist Party cooking pots? It is a serious question, because if your campuses are subsidized by the Chinese government, if your joint educational partnerships are majority owned by the Chinese government, aren't you then eating the Communist Party's food and then subject to its rules just like any Chinese university? I remember almost 10 years ago when Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, and Cisco here testified at a hearing about censorship and raised their hands and gave their oath that they would tell the truth. The persistent response to their censorship and their opening up of their personally identifiable information was that to the communist dictatorship in China was that they were just following Chinese law. And many great people like activists, and particularly in the media area, were imprisoned because of that complicity, because they were enabling of that. I'll never forget showing pictures of Tiananmen Square on Google, which showed nothing but nice pictures. That's the Chinese version. And then if you went to Google, obviously the one that we have access to, you've got millions of hits of tanks in the square and young students being killed. There are 9 U.S. educational partnerships operating in China. New York University, Shanghai opened its doors to students in September 2013. Duke, University of California, Berkeley School of Engineering, Kane College, which is located, of course, in my own state of New Jersey. In addition, there's Fort Hays State University out of Kansas, and there are a couple of others as well. I would point out to my colleagues that we have also asked, because we really do, this is the second in what will be a multi-series of hearings on this, asked the General Accountability Office, and they've agreed to study the agreements of both satellite campuses in China and the Confucius Institutes in the United States. I know some agreements are public while others are not. In fact, some schools made their agreements public after our last hearing, and we were very grateful for that. We're looking for complete and total transparency, and we'll be asking all universities and colleges to make their agreements with the Chinese government public. We need to know if universities and colleges who are starting satellite programs in China can be, again, islands of freedom in China or in other parts of the world. We need to know what pressures are being placed on them to compromise and backstop them, knowing that the Congress and the U.S. government is behind they being unfettered in their ability to have academic freedom. These are important questions. Can they be handled by the universities and faculties and trustees themselves, or are there things that the U.S. Congress and State Department and the White House need to be doing to protect these freedoms? I'd like to yield to my good friend and colleague, Mr. Sherman, any comments he might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not ranking member of this subcommittee. I'm not even a member of this subcommittee. Karen Bass asked me to sit in and promised that I could leave at 2:45, which I will need to do. But I am the ranking member of the Asia Subcommittee, which I believe is somewhat relevant to this discussion. As an interloper to this subcommittee, I want to commend the chair and congratulate the chair and the ranking member Bass on the passage of AGOA today on the House floor. When it comes to the greatest human rights deprivation by China, it is probably the enormous trade deficit they run with the United States. We're now engaged in this strategic and economic dialogue. All the bigwigs from China are here. The entire State Department's dedicated to them. Hundreds of pages of pronouncements are being generated. I can't find one that actually mentions that we have a $343 billion trade deficit with China. I can't, and I would point out that while there are dozens and dozens of meetings, Congress has been excluded. Well, none of them are with members of Congress, except for the administration has created this Potemkin village situation where members of Congress are invited to participate only if they do not speak to anyone from China. God forbid the Chinese find out that there are people in the United States, unlike perhaps the administration, who care about that I mentioned the $343 billion trade deficit. Now, as to the matter at hand, we've got to focus on what effect these educational relationships have with free speech in the United States and free speech in China. One other issue that's mentioned is, are we just cheapening the brand independent of human rights and politics? Are we sending people over, are the Chinese learning mathematics the same way they would learn at the home campus here? That, I think, is a little outside of government's purview. There are Buicks being sold in China, and if GM wants to make a Yugo and put a Buick nameplate on it and sell it to the Chinese, that's their business, and it will hurt their business. The universities have a lot tied up in the value of their name. I think that will at least assure that good mathematics is taught by those good universities that establish branches in China. But the question is, what is the effect of this relationship on free speech there and free speech here? As to free speech there, I think that American campuses in China are doing a better job of honoring American values of free speech than any other campus in China. So our presence there does raise the standard to some degree. Even better is when, from a free speech standpoint, is when Chinese students come here. I guarantee that every Chinese student that comes here will have a chance often to see the cooking pots of the Communist Party of China smashed. It will be a good experience for them. But as to those who are taught there, we would want to have the highest standard of free speech, the highest standard of political inquiry and tough Socratic questions. My guess is that we will not be able to reach American standards. I'm also concerned about the effect this all has on free speech here. For example, AMC, I believe it's the second largest owner of movie screens in the United States, is now Chinese-owned. Is Richard Gere going to be in a movie about Tibet that's made in the future by some studio that feels that being on movie screens in the United States is not relevant to the success of the movie? I don't know. But we do know that such movie will not be on Chinese screens and may have difficulty being on Chinese-owned screens here in the United States. More tuned to academia, I've seen Turkey try to buy chairs of genocide denial by endowing chairs of history, and I would be concerned about China endowing chairs at our university. They have a program worldwide of teaching Confucianism. I think China should be very proud of Confucian philosophy and what is added to the world. The world could learn more about Confucianism. But I have a fear that if it's up to the Chinese government, the version that you will learn will involve not breaking the cooking pots of the Chinese Communist Party. We do have to worry about the influence of money. Universities are not exempt from this, and there is a ton of money. We already see the enormous political power China gets from our corporations. The easiest way to make money is to make something for pennies in China and sell it for dollars in the United States. A lot of people are in that business, and they are a powerful force here in Washington and in the general political circles. And, of course, the money that our universities make on the Chinese enterprise, whether it be campuses there or students coming here, may very well affect what is taught, what stances are taken, who does the teaching. So, in conclusion, I think that having our campuses there helps free speech in China, though doesn't help as much as if we were able to obtain the levels of purity and free discourse that I'd like to see. But we can do better, and a hearing like this will push people like you to move in the right direction. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Rohrabacher.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank our witnesses for coming today, and I'd like to thank the chairman. Chairman Smith has been a stalwart example of what I think Americanism is supposed to be all about. We are supposed to stand for other things rather than simply corporate profit and making money. Now, I'm not against making money, and I'm for lower taxes, but that's not what our founding fathers had in mind. Just a place where selfish people could come and make a load of money and not care about any other values. No, instead, it's very clear that our founding fathers believed that there are certain rights that are granted by God to people everywhere. Every individual has rights that are granted by God, and that we Americans, that we should lead the way and hold out as basic values so that the world, we don't have to go to war with everybody, but at the very least, we should be the example to the world and an inspiration to people of China and everywhere that would like to have their freedom as well. I think the moment of truth, Mr. Chairman, came, and I was very sad. We were defining ourselves in 1989 when the Chinese military poured into Tiananmen Square and slaughtered the democracy movement. Let me just note that when I was working with Ronald Reagan in the White House for 7 years, we prided ourselves that we brought down the Soviet Union without an actual military confrontation between our two societies. But we did that by supporting and financing and bolstering the efforts of those people who were struggling for freedom in their own country, in the Soviet Union, and those countries that the Soviet Union was trying to dominate. And in 1989, the moment came for China to get, again, reverse its course from dictatorship and totalitarianism, and we let them down, we let ourselves down. We let ourselves down because that cowardice that we showed in not confronting the Chinese leadership was something that we are now beginning to experience the negative side of that decision. Many people said, well, what would he have done to back them up? Ronald Reagan, who I worked for 7.5 years, was not president at the time. Had he been president at the time, there would have been a phone call as soon as he got an intelligence report that the Chinese army was going into Tiananmen Square, and that would have said, I'm sorry, if you destroy the democracy movement in China, the deal is off. No open markets, no technology transfers, no interaction and cooperative efforts and social interaction. It's all off. Don't destroy the democracy movement. Herbert Walker Bush's telephone call, when it went like this. There was no telephone call. And after they invaded Tiananmen Square and slaughtered the democracy movement, there was no price for the Communist Party of China to pay. And we continued having policies that enriched them and their control over their country. China's evolution stopped that day, and since then, there has been no democratic reform in China, although we have been told, even after Tiananmen Square, if we just have this interaction economically and socially, and like the education programs we're talking today, China will evolve into a better country. I have always called that the hug a Nazi, make a liberal theory. And there has been no evolution toward political freedom in China. But we have seen an enrichment and an empowering of an elite, a despotic and brutal and belligerent elite in China. And it is now becoming very evident that this new China that's emerging is a major and poses, at least in the future, not only as a symbol of repression to their own people, but as a belligerent threat to the rest of the world. When we don't stand up for freedom with those people struggling for freedom in these countries, we pay the price in the end. And that's what's happening. And we have seen all of these proposals like we're going to discuss today with interaction on education. And there's been lots of these various programs that supposedly we're going to make China a freer, evolve towards a freer direction. We have instead enriched them and empowered them. They're in the economic arena. And Mr. Chairman, wait one second. Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit for the record at this point a letter that I have just sent out describing and alerting our government to the fact that a major American company has brought this to my attention, that the Chinese have a predatory strategy when it comes to business, and especially they are trying to get control of the chip manufacturing, get control or at least have a dominating influence on the manufacture of computer chips. And with your permission, I would like to submit for the record a letter that I've just sent today alerting our government to that fact.
Without objection, so ordered.
Okay. Now, this was brought to my attention by an American company there, and I have the letter. It's to the Secretary of the Treasury right here, right now, and I hope that we pay attention to that predatory and that negative strategy by the part of the Communist Party of China. However, what we talk about today, I think, where that's an immediate threat. This idea that we are having, and I disagree with my friend Mr. Sherman on this, and we usually agree on things. I do not believe that we need to bring Chinese students over here and train them in our technology schools. If they want to come over and take some courses in social studies, I think maybe that's okay. But I'd like to hear from the panel today. I understand many of these students that are coming over are taking graduate level classes in the sciences. Number one, that puts them in a position to out-compete us, but puts us in jeopardy in terms of knowledge that we have spent billions of dollars trying to develop in our scientific research. That should not be just shared with individuals from another country if they're going to take it home to that country. So we need to start using, number one, a moral system to guide our decision-making in terms of countries like China, but we need to be courageous, and we need to make sure that we are honest with ourselves about what these policies are accomplishing. Thank you again. Thanks to the witnesses for alerting us what's going on with our universities, how that's impacting this whole dynamic at play. So thank you
very much, Chairman Rohrabacher. Just, you underscored, and I think most members of the panel know this, that Mr. Rohrabacher was a speechwriter for Ronald Reagan, and the opposition to what George Herbert Walker Bush did, especially in sending Brent Scowcroft soon after Tiananmen Square to assure the dictatorship that they had nothing to fear from the United States, was one of the most infamous betrayals, in my opinion, that is only paralleled by, not exceeded or matched, but paralleled by President Clinton when he delinked human rights and trade infamously on a Friday afternoon when the Chinese took the measure of the United States of America and said, profits trump human rights, and the executive order, which I had lauded, held press conference after press conference, thanking President Clinton for, only to find out that it was a ruse. That was when they realized that America, at least the administration, cared only about making more money at the expense of human rights activism. And none of the matriculation from dictatorship to human rights protections have occurred. Mark Meadows, the Vice Chairman of
Mr. Chairman,
committee.
since the gentleman from California mentioned me, I was simply saying that Chinese students here in the United States will learn our systems of free expression. I never weighed that benefit to our values with the technological progress that they might be able to furnish to their government, and so you'd have to weigh one or the other. And I join with the gentleman in feeling that those who study sociology, political science, and history in the United States are more of a pure plus for our values.
Chair recognizes Mr. Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very, very brief. Thank each of you for your willingness to testify here today, for illuminating an issue that, if we do not talk about, becomes a bigger and bigger problem. And so your testimony is not only important, but it's also one that hopefully will make a change. The chairman has been a champion for human rights and freedom of speech and freedom of religion, unparalleled by anybody else here in Congress. And so it's an honor to serve with him. It certainly is one that we would love to know what legislative things or what pressure can be brought to bear for us to truly address that. Coming from the great state of North Carolina, we have a lot of institutions of higher learning, and I enjoy a good relationship with many of those. And so, Mr. Chairman, this is a fly-out day, and there's not many members, and so I wanted to be here to show that it is not only a priority for the chairman, but priority for many of the others of us in Congress. So thank you for being here. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Meadows. Let me begin first by introducing our first distinguished panelist, Mr. Jeffrey Lehman, who is the first Vice Chancellor of NYU Shanghai. He has previously been Chancellor and founding Dean of the Peking University School of Transnational Law, President of Cornell University, Dean of the University of Michigan Law School, a tenured Professor of Law and Public Policy at the University of Michigan. He's also been a practicing lawyer in Washington, D.C., a law clerk, including being a law clerk, to the Associate Justice John Paul Stevens of the United States Supreme Court. Welcome, Mr. Lehman. We'll then hear from Ms. Susan Lawrence, who is a specialist in Asian affairs at the Congressional Research Service, a unit of the Library of Congress that provides the U.S. Congress with research and analysis. She covers U.S.-China relations, Chinese foreign policy, Chinese domestic politics, Taiwan, and Mongolia. She joined CRS after a career spent largely in journalism, in which she worked in Beijing for 11 years and reported from Washington, D.C. Immediately prior to joining CRS, Ms. Lawrence managed public health advocacy programs in China for a Washington, D.C. based NGO. Then we'll hear from Mr. Robert Daly, who has directed the Kissinger Institute on China and the U.S. At the Wilson Center since 2013. Previously, he was at the University of Maryland, where he served from 2007 until 2013, and prior to that, he was an American director of the Johns Hopkins University Nanjing University Center for Chinese and American Studies for 6 years. Mr. Daly began his work in U.S.-China relations as a diplomat, serving as an officer in the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. He has taught at Cornell, Syracuse, and has worked on TV and theater projects in China as a host, actor, and writer. We'll then hear from Dr. Myrta Martin, who was appointed the 9th president of Fort Hays State University in 2014. Dr. Martin is the first female president in the 113-year history of Fort Hays State University, and the first Hispanic president in the more than 150-year history of the entire Kansas Regents system. Dr. Martin's career involves work in both public and private sectors, including special expertise in organizational behavior, management, institutional advancement, and workplace development. She has worked as a senior banking executive, held numerous positions in higher education, and was appointed by the former governor of Virginia to serve on the Virginia Council on the Status of Women. And then we'll hear from Ms. Yangshi Zhao, who is the founder and editor of ChinaChange.org, an English language website devoted to news and commentary related to civil society, the rule of law, and human rights activities in China. The site works to help the rest of the world understand what people are thinking and doing to affect change in the PRC. Reports and translations on China Change have been cited by the New York Times, Time Magazine, The Guardian, Telegraph, and The Washington Post, The New Republic, among others, and, of course, has been included in many congressional reports. Ms. Zhao grew up in northern China during the Cultural Revolution and studied literature in the United States. Mr. Lehman, if you could proceed.
Chairman Smith, other members of Congress, I thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. I have submitted detailed written testimony concerning my experiences in China. Because of time constraints, my oral testimony will only touch the key points. I moved to China in 2008 because the president of Peking University asked me to help his university create the first law school outside the United States to offer a true JD program taught in the American way. I hesitated at first, but people like Justice Anthony Kennedy stressed my patriotic duty as an American to help develop the rule of law in China, and so I agreed to go. But I insisted that I be given absolute control over the school's curriculum and faculty appointments, and that the school operate according to fundamental principles of academic freedom. Peking University has fully honored those promises. For example, the students there study American constitutional principles with the legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California, and they learn about international courts from the chair of the American Bar Association Human Rights Advisory Council. That law school is part of a government-supported effort inside China to experiment with new approaches to higher education, and so is NYU Shanghai, which began teaching in 2013. NYU Shanghai is a degree-granting campus of New York University whose work must be accredited by both the Middle States Commission on Higher Education in Philadelphia and China's Ministry of Education in Beijing. The trustees of New York University award degrees to its graduates. Therefore, NYU agreed to participate on the condition that it would operate under principles of academic freedom. NYU has exclusive and final responsibility over faculty appointments, student admissions, curricula, academic policies and procedures, etc. Half of NYU Shanghai's undergraduates come from China, and half come from the rest of the world. NYU Shanghai delivers an undergraduate liberal education in the humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences, promoting the skills of critical and creative thinking. All of our undergraduate students pursue a core curriculum in Shanghai for 2 years, and then spend their junior year studying at other campuses within NYU's network, which now spans 14 cities around the world, and then they return to Shanghai to complete their degrees. We at NYU choose the faculty who teach our courses, and I'm proud to say that we have recruited a remarkable group of stars who do not diminish the brand and who are listed in Appendix 1 to my written testimony. Financially, NYU does not profit from its activities in Shanghai. NYU Shanghai sits as a tub on its own bottom. So why, you might ask, has NYU taken this on? 2 reasons stand out. First, NYU Shanghai advances NYU's bold redefinition of how a university can be structured. In the 21st century, the phenomena of globalization and modern information and communications technologies have created new challenges and new opportunities for humanity. In order to more effectively fulfill its academic mission, NYU expanded to become a global network of campuses and academic centers in important cities. Students can enter NYU through the degree-granting campuses in New York, Abu Dhabi, and Shanghai, and they can study away in 11 other cities. Shanghai is a superb location for NYU to have established a degree-granting campus. China is an extraordinarily important and rapidly changing country, and Shanghai is New York's natural counterpart. Second, NYU Shanghai provides NYU with an essential opportunity to reflect deeply about what knowledge, skills, and virtues this generation of students requires in order to lead lives of satisfaction and contribution. NYU Shanghai is a place where NYU can experiment with new ways of developing those qualities. For example, because it is so important today that each of us know how to see the world through the eyes of others, NYU Shanghai requires every student to live with a roommate from another country. I personally teach the course that all students are required to take during freshman year, an intellectual history course which I teach using the Socratic method, in which students engage a set of great books by authors such as Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, John Locke, Adam Smith, and Friedrich Hayek. These are the same readings I would use if I were teaching the course in New York, and I included syllabi from the course as Appendix 2 to my written testimony. NYU Shanghai is a pioneering university, and we receive dozens of visitors to our campus every week. We would be delighted if any members of this subcommittee or their staffs would come to visit us. People who have not visited us in person occasionally suggest that NYU Shanghai should not exist. Sometimes they argue that American universities should stay away from any authoritarian country. Sometimes they say that China presents unique risks that render academic freedom impossible. While I appreciate the good motives of these individuals who speculate about our university from afar, I do not believe their conclusions are well-founded. First of all, the benefits of engagement are enormous. Our universities in America nurture skills and values that we believe are important to their well-being as individuals and to their societies. We are all better off if Chinese students, American students, and students from around the world have the chance to study at institutions like ours, and we would all be better off if countries all around the world developed institutions like ours that could provide those benefits to large numbers of their citizens. China is in the middle of a period of astonishing change. Within Chinese society, there is heated debate about what direction change should take over the next 2 decades and about what goals should take precedence over others. This debate is more likely to go well if the participants can point to the positive impact of schools like NYU Shanghai on Chinese students. The challenge of engagement in foreign lands is real, but it does not come close to offsetting those benefits. American universities themselves grew and prospered in a flawed country with serious human rights problems like slavery, but our universities have been durable institutions and have made important contributions to America's progress. To be sure, we have to be vigilant. A university such as ours cannot function if students and faculty are not free to ask questions and to entertain arguments that might be disruptive and even offensive to others. Norms of civility may be imposed, but they must not cut off genuine and rigorous inquiry. If it were become impossible to operate with academic freedom, NYU would close down its Shanghai campus. Last weekend, I told a Shanghainese friend that I would be testifying here today. He asked why, and I explained that some people who value the free exchange of ideas believe American universities should not be present in China. His response was crisp and I believe quite apt. He said, "If someone is truly committed to the free exchange of ideas here in China, they should want to see more schools like NYU Shanghai, not fewer." I believe in my heart that this is a noble project. It is not without risk, but it has the potential to benefit all of humanity. In my written testimony, I suggest that Congress consider creating a scholarship program to ensure that students from families of modest means are able to study abroad at programs like these. I hope that you will take that proposal seriously. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lehman, thank you very much for your testimony. I'd like to now ask Ms. Lawrence if she would proceed.
Chairman Smith, Congressman Rohrabacher, Congressman Sherman, Congressman Meadows, thank you for this invitation to testify today. China's Ministry of Education indicates it has so far approved 11 U.S. universities and 1 U.S. individual to work with Chinese partners to run cooperative education institutions in China, essentially joint campuses. The ministry has granted 3 of these institutions independent legal person status, which may give them some greater autonomy in their operations than those without such status. Those 3 are NYU Shanghai, Duke Kunshan University, and Wenzhou Cain University. In addition, the Chinese Ministry of Education has approved a broader set of U.S. universities to work with Chinese partners to offer degree programs on campuses operated solely by Chinese partners. More than 80 U.S. universities are involved in partnerships to offer undergraduate degrees, and more than 30 U.S. universities are involved in partnerships to offer graduate degrees in China. In all, universities from at least 36 of the 50 U.S. states appear to be involved in approved cooperative educational institutions or programs in China. In the case of high-profile partnerships to establish new joint campuses, U.S. universities cite benefits in the forms of generous funding from the Chinese side, typically covering all campus construction costs and some or all operating costs, opportunities for new global research collaborations, and opportunities for students on the university's home campuses to broaden their education through study abroad. Critics of U.S. educational collaborations in China have focused on several areas of concern. The most prominent relates to the compromises U.S. universities may be forced to make with regard to academic freedom, the subject of this hearing. Educational institutions in China, including those with U.S. partners, are subject to an array of Chinese laws and administrative regulations and guidance documents. The key national laws include the 1995 Education Law and the 1998 Higher Education Law. Several provisions of the Higher Education Law have implications for academic freedom on campuses with U.S. partners. As I'll discuss later, however, not all of these provisions appear to be uniformly enforced. Article 10 of the Higher Education Law stipulates that the state, quote, safeguards the freedom of scientific research, literary and artistic creations, and other cultural activities in institutions of higher learning according to law, end quote. But it also says that such creations and activities should abide by law, potentially limiting such freedoms. Article 39 of the law outlines the leadership role of Communist Party committees in state-run higher education institutions. It states that Communist Party committees, quote, exercise unified leadership over the work of the institutions, end quote, and that the committee's duties are, among other things, to guide ideological and political work and moral education on campuses and to make key personnel decisions. Article 51 of the law stipulates that, quote, the basis for the appointment or dismissal, end quote, of faculty and administrative personnel should be ideology and political performance first, followed by professional ethics, professional skill, and actual achievements. Similarly, Article 58 of the law stipulates that students should be permitted to graduate if they first are qualified in their ideology and moral character, end quote, and secondarily, if they have completed the study of the courses required and have passed the examinations or got all the credits required. Finally, Article 53 requires that students of institutions of higher learning should, quote, build up their physiques and the concepts of patriotism, collectivism, and socialism, diligently study Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, and Deng Xiaoping theory, have sound ideology and moral character, and grasp a comparatively high level of scientific and cultural knowledge and specialized skills, end quote. In 2003, China's State Council promulgated regulations specifically addressing collaborations with foreign partners in education. The regulations bar foreign partners from involvement in military academies, police academies, and political education. They also bar foreign religious organizations, religious institutions, religious colleges and universities, and so-called religious workers from involvement in cooperative education efforts in China, and they bar joint campuses from offering religious education or conducting religious activities. The regulations require that Chinese foreign educational collaborations, quote, not jeopardize China's sovereignty, security, and public interests, end quote. A broad requirement that Chinese authorities could use to rule out academic discussion related to Taiwan, Tibet, Uyghurs, electoral reform in Hong Kong, the Falun Gong spiritual group, and other topics. It appears that in practice, the Chinese government has been willing to relax some of these requirements, particularly in the case of jointly operated institutions with independent legal person status and significant numbers of non-Chinese students, such as NYU Shanghai and Duke Kunshan University, a partnership among Duke University, China's Wuhan University, and the government of Kunshan Municipality in China's Jiangsu province. On the role of party committees, a 2013 article in the Global Times, a tabloid affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party's paper of record, the People's Daily, cited unnamed educators as saying that, quote, unlike Chinese universities, where administrative interference is considered one of the biggest problems with the education system, the party committees in these branch campuses usually don't have a say in academic affairs, end quote. NYU Shanghai's chancellor, Yu Lizhong, told a Hong Kong newspaper in 2012 that the NYU Shanghai campus would be run by a board of directors rather than by a Communist Party committee. And the NYU Shanghai website contains no reference to a party committee. Public reports of the Communist Party activities of NYU Shanghai staff relate to their participation in party bodies and activities not at NYU Shanghai, but at NYU Shanghai's academic partner in the NYU Shanghai campus, East China Normal University. NYU Shanghai's head of human resources, for example, is identified on East China Normal University's website as serving concurrently as the head of the party branch of East China Normal University's Chinese Foreign Cooperation Office. In contrast, one of the three campuses run jointly by Fort Hays State University, Henan province-based SIAS International University, openly lists information about its Communist Party committee on its Chinese language website. The website lists the school's party secretary and deputy party secretary as among the 9 members of the school's leadership group, and includes an organization chart showing party structures across the university, including party groups in the university's business school, law school, School of International Education, and 9 other schools. On the scope of permitted expression, US media reports indicate that academic discussions on campuses in China jointly operated by US partners do sometimes stray onto topics that would be taboo on other campuses in China, especially when the joint campuses include significant numbers of non-Chinese students. Such campuses may also have arrangements allowing their students unfettered access to the internet, including to sites that are usually blocked in China, such as Google, Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Such allowances may contribute to greater levels of overall academic freedom on such campuses than China normally tolerates. The legal guarantees underpinning such zones of free speech, however, remain ambiguous, raising questions about the long-term sustainability of such zones. Some observers have also noted that because joint campuses in China tend to be heavily subsidized by the Chinese government, the government may have significant leverage if serious disputes over academic freedom issues should arise. My fellow panelists are the experts on how their institutions operate within the broad legal and regulatory framework for institutions of higher learning in China, and within the context of their individual partnership agreements and their legal person status. I look forward to learning from them. Thank you again, Chairman Smith, for the opportunity to testify about these issues. As an employee of the Congressional Research Service, I'm confined to speaking about the technical and professional aspects of the issues under discussion in this hearing, and to answering questions within my field of expertise. With that understanding, I look forward to your questions.
Ms. Lawrence, thank you very much for your testimony and for the, and without objection, your full statement, and that of all of our distinguished witnesses will be made a part of the record, and, but I thank you for it. Now, Mr. Dale.
I'd like to thank the chair and the other members of the committee for the chance to discuss a very important set of issues with you today. These are issues that I have worked on from within government and academia for almost 30 years. And I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, that all of your concerns are very well founded, and they require constant attention from the practitioners in the field who are working with China. There are no easy answers to this. It requires balance. Many of my Chinese colleagues and friends would be surprised to hear that there was a discussion today about Chinese influence on American universities, because in their experience, the influence has flowed almost entirely in the other direction since 1854, when the first Chinese earned a degree from an American university. In fact, the very idea of the university, the modern university in China, was introduced from the West and primarily from the United States by people like John Leighton Stewart, by Johns Hopkins University, Oberlin, Yale, and Harvard, who brought the idea of the academic disciplines at university degrees to China in the first place, and the model for China's universities, their structures, their degrees, their governance, with the exception of the involvement of the Chinese Communist Party, which is pervasive, as you suggest. This model comes primarily from the United States. Even today, Chinese universities are adapting American academic standards and models to suit China's needs, and Chinese scholars seek partnership with American experts and publication in American journals. Furthermore, young Chinese, as you have mentioned, now comprise 29% of all foreign students in the U.S., and approximately 2 million have pursued degrees here since 1979. On the other side of the equation, American academics rarely seek publication in Chinese journals, most of which are of low quality and many of which deal in plagiarized and faked research. And few American students pursue degrees from Chinese universities. Most American students who visit China, and I support them to do so, I believe strongly in the value of study abroad, but most of these students go for short-term language and cultural classes as part of U.S. degree programs. So Chinese education as such holds really very little allure for Americans. So there can be no question that American universities have far greater impact on China than China has on them. Just as there can be no question that American soft power in China overall, our influence on Chinese institutions, the aspirations, tastes, and values of the Chinese people, while they are not what we would like them to be, dwarf China's soft power here. And I think that that fact has to be kept clearly in mind, because calls for reconsideration of our policy of engagement with China are growing more strident. Still, yes, as you note, China does exert influence on American universities, and that seems to be growing. And it comes, I believe, primarily from American colleges and universities' need for and their fear of losing Chinese sources of financing, although it doesn't come only from there. We should mention, too, that while we are talking about our concerns about Chinese impacts on America, we should recognize the contribution that educational exchanges with China have made to the United States. This is not just a story about the flow of Chinese money into American universities. Even more beneficial has been the flow of Chinese talent and energy into American society. Many of the Chinese students who study here remain in the U.S. after graduation, and this new generation of immigrants, like their predecessors, is providing a vital infusion of expertise into every professional field and academic discipline in the United States. So we should recognize today that when we speak of Chinese students, this is not to demonize them. We are also speaking of our American neighbors, colleagues, and friends, and they're making a big contribution to this country. We should also note that money isn't the only thing that American universities want from the PRC. They also cooperate with China in order to fulfill their academic missions. American scholars, if they are to be leaders in their field, need access to Chinese archives, data, and research sites. They need to interview Chinese experts and survey Chinese populations. They need study abroad opportunities for American students. American students now cannot be leaders in their field unless they have knowledge in China. In short, because the PRC is now central, whether we like it or not, to nearly every global issue, be it strategic, economic, technological, environmental, public health, U.S. universities cannot do their work. They cannot be universal unless they engage with China to some degree. This is a new situation not only for American universities, but for American corporations, professional institutions, American filmmakers, American subnational governments. They now have China interests, China relations, and China policies. This is a positive development, I believe, in the main, but it has its dangers. American universities fear ill repute in China. They fear being cut off from China. They fear the loss of Chinese tuition and fees. And this fear does give China leverage, and China knows it. We should furthermore be worried about how China will use the leverage. As the chairman has mentioned, Document 9 and following documents make very clear that issues like constitutional democracy, civil society, neoliberal economics, Western ideas of journalism cannot be discussed openly in Chinese universities or in the Chinese media. Earlier this year, China's Minister of Education, Yuan Guiren, told a meeting of Chinese academic leaders in Beijing that they should reduce the number of Western published textbooks in their classrooms and, quote, by no means allow teaching materials that disseminate Western values. The reason for this prohibition was provided by the state-run Global Times paper that Susan mentioned. They wrote, quote, young students and teachers are the major groups used by enemy forces to penetrate and divide China. This is the attitude. So Yuan's statement sounds like a direct order to Chinese universities and a direct threat to American schools that offer American degrees on Chinese soil. If Western textbooks, as China claims, are vectors that infect young Chinese minds and weaken the country, are not Western faculty members and universities more dangerous still? And it is this situation, I think, that has compelled this committee to ask the question about whether academic freedom can be maintained while working in and with a country such as the PRC. Despite these difficulties, however, I would argue that there is a way forward under the current set of circumstances. Now, circumstances could change, and there's definitely a time to pull out tent stakes and say that, yes, while the perfect may be the enemy of the good, China is imposing conditions on American universities that they cannot meet. As you mentioned, there could be a time to leave, but we are not there yet. And the reason, I think, is that despite Xi Jinping's ideology campaign and despite the political character of Chinese universities, American universities have been able to find ways to interact with Chinese counterparts that do not threaten academic freedom. How can this be done? Is there room for honorable maneuver? I think there is, because as Susan has suggested, Xi Jinping's campaign and Yuan Guiren's pronouncements against American textbooks haven't meant much in practice yet on campuses. There is an atmosphere of hesitancy and fear in Chinese academic, cultural, and media circles that we haven't seen since the aftermath of the Tiananmen massacre. But to date, there have been no reports of Chinese faculty being required to revise their reading lists or of Chinese colleges altering their curricula. There has as yet been no systematic implementation of this very backward and draconian ideological campaign. Many Chinese students and scholars within China, furthermore, question and mock openly Yuan Guiren's call to restrict Western textbooks. And they do this in state-run media, so it's hard to keep track of what all this means in China. The president of Tiankai University, Zhou Enlai's alma mater, wrote in the Communist Party flagship paper, The People's Daily, quote, I've read people on the internet saying that the ranks of academics must be cleansed, purified, and rectified. I can't agree with this. This was the mentality of 1957, the violent anti-rightist campaign, or 1966, which was the launch of the Cultural Revolution. Other Chinese critics point out gleefully that Marxism is itself a Western idea and that this campaign is therefore self-contradictory and incoherent. So we don't yet know where this is headed. There is space, it is in play. And it may be that Beijing is only playing lip service to rectification on Chinese campuses because Beijing remains conflicted about the influence of the West. We still lead, we the West, with the United States at the fore, lead the world in nearly every field of academic inquiry. And Xi Jinping surely knows that despite demonizing Western culture, China cannot meet his reform goals unless it masters Western learning. His desire to make China a leader in the international knowledge economy and his demand that Chinese universities produce more innovative students are at odds with his calls for ideological purity, and everyone in China knows that his own daughter is a graduate of Harvard University, so it makes it hard to be too loud about these issues. So lastly, I would like to just make a few specific recommendations going forward to universities that want to work with China. One is I would suggest that all memoranda of understanding with Chinese universities state clearly that any relationship or program can be concluded at any time by either party if its standards of academic freedom, academic integrity, or academic rigor are compromised. This clause will serve as a warning to both sides and a reminder of first principles, and it will protect American partners if Xi's ideological agenda is actually put into practice, at which point these programs do become untenable in my view. MOUs should also, as the chair suggests, be made public, as any practices that fall short of full transparency will fuel our reasonable skepticism, the skepticism that American faculty, students, and other university stakeholders rightly have. American faculty, furthermore, and having worked in Hopkins and other universities, I've seen this in practice, American faculty should be consulted at every stage in the planning of cooperative ventures with China, and faculty should vote to decide whether projects meet their standards of academic quality. This is essential because university administrators have to consider financial and political matters, while faculty loyalty is to their discipline, to their departments, and to standards, so faculty need to lead. U.S. colleges and universities should not allow the Chinese government, or any other national government, or its agencies, to appoint faculty or instructors on American campuses, to violate U.S. fair hiring laws, or to dictate program conditions that violate U.S. best practices. And lastly, the U.S. government. You asked what the government can do. We should ask regularly in our representations, ask Beijing to clarify its opposition to Western culture and its policies restricting foreign NGOs. China does not shy away, as you know, from accusing American media of bias against China. We shouldn't be reticent about asking why Beijing has a formal campaign demonizing our values. But in closing, even as we remain vigilant, I think that we must remember that our educational institutions, culture, and ideas have vastly more influence in China than China has here. That influence is made possible by our policy of engagement. Curtailing engagement would cut off our influence, which would serve neither American interests nor those of the Chinese people. Thank you.
Mr. Daly, thank you so very much for your testimony. We're joined by Elliot Engel, who's the ranking Democrat on the full Foreign Affairs Committee. Mr. Engel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling this hearing. Thank you for your leadership. We have discussed this together for many, many years. Thank you for your concern about academic freedom, especially when it comes to American institutions operating in the People's Republic of China. Let me welcome our witnesses. Thank you for sharing your time and expertise. We really, really appreciate it. I want to give a shout out to Vice Chancellor Lehman. NYU is near and dear to my heart. Very proud to have that as a wonderful institution of New York City. And while you're not in New York City, you're certainly an extension of that wonderful, wonderful campus. And so welcome. And I also am told that you're a native of Bronxville, New York, which is in my district. So that's two good things. And I know you've come a long way to be with us today, all the way from Shanghai. So grateful to see you. I support these things. I think academic exchanges are a very critical tool for building relationships between Americans and people around the world. I was a teacher myself. Before I ever got a law degree, before I ever went into politics, I was a classroom teacher. I've seen firsthand how new ideas and new perspectives can transform a student's understanding of the world and of themselves. And when students from around the world sit in our classrooms, or when American academics teach and research abroad, I really believe it helps to spread knowledge and understanding, and these person-to-person ties are the foundation of strong engagements between countries and governments, and that's why I think these exchanges are our priority and should remain so in our foreign policy. So thank all of you for what you do. The United States and China have a troubled relationship in many ways, but have a long history of educational exchange. And as Mr. Daly testified, the U.S. has had far more influence on China as a result of these educational exchanges than China has had on the United States. So we should put aside the question of whether these exchanges should take place. The value, as far as I'm concerned, is clear, but we should be asking how they take place. We need to make sure these educational agreements continue to benefit students and teachers, and also to advance American interests. We've heard that NYU has worked hard to maintain full academic freedom on their campus in Shanghai. So far, the Chinese authorities, I'm told, haven't interfered with course material or classroom discussions. So to me, it seems that the NYU Shanghai campus is resulting in more freedom and a greater exchange of ideas, not less. To be sure, NYU needs to stay vigilant in protecting these freedoms, and I expect that will be the case. Another issue is whether financial arrangements between university partners could prejudice the academic freedom of U.S. institutions. Fort Hays State has established 2 campuses in China that issue U.S. bachelor's degrees to Chinese students, one through a partnership with SIAS, SIAS International University, and one with the Shenyang Normal University. Dr. Martin, I guess, will testify in your written testimony that the faculty have voluntarily chosen to avoid the topic of the Tiananmen Square massacre. The issue is considered too sensitive for discussion in China. I think we need to take a hard look at this sort of self-censorship and how it relates to the academic freedom of American institutions, and I look forward to a rich discussion. So I'm going to end by again thanking the chairman for having this very important hearing, and thanking our witnesses for giving their unique perspectives. That's how we in Congress learn. We talk to ourselves too much. We like to learn by talking to people who are experts in what they do. So thank you all, and appreciate you coming here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Engel. Dr. Martin, please proceed.
Good afternoon, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the U.S. House of Representatives. Thank you for affording me today the opportunity to come before you and to provide you with testimony. In the interest of time, and with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I will provide you a summary of those comments since you have the full spectrum in your possession. Fort Hays State University was established in 1902 when the U.S. House of Representatives decommissioned the U.S. Army base, Fort Hays, and gave the land to form a state university. Since then, Fort Hays has evolved and is now a regional comprehensive university serving close to 14,000 students through 3 modalities. On campus, where we serve approximately 4,800 students, the virtual college, which delivers online education to about 5,800 students located in Kansas, nearly all 50 states, and the U.S. Armed Services personnel internationally, and in China, where we have approximately 3,100 students. In March of 1999, Fort Hays State University was introduced to a private university in China, SIAS International University, a university that had previously been approved by the Chinese government. SIAS affiliates with the prestigious Shenzhou University, located in the Henan province of China, which is a sister province to the state of Kansas. Fort Hays State University profile was presented to the Ministry of Education in China, who approved the request to deliver courses leading to a bachelor's degree. This partnership came under the Chinese regulation of Sino-Foreign cooperation in running schools, and the initial agreement was signed in May of 2000. In the fall of 2000, Fort Hays State University delivered its first courses to 40 students. Fort Hays State University does not have a satellite campus in China. Rather, it operates through a partnership agreement to deliver courses leading to bachelor degrees, which are dual in nature. These courses are taught by faculty hired by Fort Hays State University, many of whom live on the campuses of our partner institutions. And Fort Hays State University has labeled the delivery of these courses cross-border education. Soon after offering Fort Hays State University's first courses, we were asked by the Chinese government to provide the syllabi, textbooks, and other instructional resources, as well as a faculty credential for the courses offered to Chinese students. All materials requested were forwarded to the Chinese government, and soon thereafter, we were approved to deliver bachelor's degrees in China. There was no censorship of the content of any course by the government, nor by the university partners. The Chinese government has never asked again to review our curriculum, to review our content, or to review the faculty credentials. In 2010, Fort Hays State University, 2 partners, SIAS University and Shenyang Normal University, which was approved in 2004, were selected by the Ministry of Education to conduct a self-study related to the quality and performance of the dual degree programs. Other universities through the world that fell under the regulations entitled Sino-Foreign Cooperation in Running Schools were also selected. The work was not inconsequential, and the results identified Fort Hays State University's practices as a model of other universities. As a matter of fact, 50% of the partners operating in China at that time failed this regulation, and as a result, their partnerships was canceled. The guarantee of teaching quality is the sole responsibility of Fort Hays State University. Faculty teaching in China report to international coordinators and department chairs who are located on the campus of Fort Hays State University, just like any other faculty would that teaches on our campus. All faculty teaching in China are required to attend a week-long training in Hays, America, conducted by the Fort Hays State University academic units prior to even setting foot in China. The Chinese government, as a matter of fact, has been rather impressed that Fort Hays State University spends significant financial resources and time to train our faculty and to ensure academic rigor and academic consistency. Faculty have had total control over the design and content of the curriculum. The textbooks and other curricular materials are selected only by our faculty. The partners purchase these materials from import-export companies, and the students are required to refer to them in the classroom. Rarely does the administration of the universities or the party secretary ever visit the Fort Hays State University courses. At this time, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to brief you very quickly on the programs offered at Fort Hays in China. All Chinese students enrolled in an academic program offered by Fort Hays State University, and they take English composition sequence 101 and 102, as would our students here in the United States. This sequence provides the foundation for introducing Chinese students to Western values and Western educational system. One of the most important goals of these courses is the development of critical thinking and critical and analytical skills. These English courses mirror the courses offered on campus at Fort Hays State University, although they are augmented with English for foreign language learners strategies to accommodate the students' abilities as English learners. Chinese students are held to exactly the same standards of academic integrities as would our U.S. students, and classroom practices such as group work, collaboration, active participation foster Western educational values. The Department of Leadership Studies and the College of Arts and Sciences offered a Bachelor of Science degrees at CS University and Shenyang Normal since 2008. Despite the academic freedom enjoyed by faculty teaching the curriculum, Fort Hays has experienced some instances where the faculty of the partner school has been complacent in undermining academic integrity. But Fort Hays State University has met with the partner institution's leadership team to work through these solutions to these issues surrounding academic integrity, and requests by Fort Hays have been met with great support. I will say that more faculty and more student training, the use of student identification cards, and enforcement on policy need to be fully implemented to augment the progress in this area. As a whole, Fort Hays State University have dealt with issues of academic integrity by taking the stance that we own the curriculum and that our standards of academic rigor and academic excellence will not be sidetracked. Collaboration between Fort Hays State University and the Department of Political Science have been extremely positive. We have experienced absolutely no efforts to infringe the academic freedom or integrity of our political science legal studies program. All universities have been respectful, transparent, and collaborative with each other. Learning about the American system of government and law has been the key learning objectives of this program. In the decade of teaching American law and government and 2 institutions in China, Fort Hays State University has never encountered any resistance in teaching Western values or political structure. Through the political science curriculum, the students receive extensive exposure to the U.S. democratic system of government and rule of law. In courses such as the American Government, Introduction to Law and Constitutional Law, Faculty spent a significant amount of time discussing the issues of civil liberties, civil rights, including the concepts of dual process, equal protection, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion and assembly, and the right of criminal defendants. In essence, we discuss our Bill of Rights. The predominant programs at Fort Hays State University's College of Business and Entrepreneurship, such as the Bachelor of Business Administration and Management and the Bachelor of Administration in International Business and Economics, by their nature, typically do not involve subjects that are sensitive or political in nature. However, our faculty have always had access to Western academic databases, albeit limited, and have never been prevented from sharing Western scholarship in classroom setting. Every semester, Fort Hays State University conducts students and faculty evaluations, and the results of these are used by the academic departments on the campus of Fort Hays State University to modify and improve quality and the performance of students overseas. Fort Hays State University faculty display principles of academic freedom and transparency through their teaching, research, and discussion with the students in China. Discussion regarding learning objective for degree programs, major, and individual courses have all been given and accepted in an atmosphere of transparency. China's new leader, Xi Jinping, has made no secret of his ambitions to revitalize China and increase her influence on the global stage, as you have stated earlier, Mr. Chairman. President Xi has made it clear that he wants to build an innovative society with strong tech firms that compete internationally. Fort Hays State University was selected and approved to deliver the first American bachelor's degree to Chinese students on Mainline Challenge. And I believe that because of that, and because of the strength of our curriculum, we are highlighting to China and its students all that is great in America. The challenges that we have faced have been addressed together with our Chinese partners under the auspices of their respective education commission, and we have protected the academic freedom and integrity of our programs. I believe that the greatest outcome of the relationships are our China students' expanded knowledge of the world and United States. The Chinese students have similar aspirations to those of the U.S. students, to be engaged in their communities, to own their own businesses, to be successful leaders and role models for their families, and to improve our world. Tom Friedman, in his book, The World is Flat, writes that students who have the facility of 2 languages, have a cultural experience in another country, and use technology to communicate worldwide are true citizens of the world. They are equipped and ready to change the world in a positive way. As I conclude, I would like to leave you perhaps with some final thoughts. From the early days of our republic, our forefathers recognized the value of a widely and highly educated citizenry to the success and stability of our nation. Indeed, we have created a system of public and private higher education that is worldwide standard for academic excellence. As a nation, as an immigrant to this country, sir, I submit to you that we need to go back to those roots. We need to return to the guiding principles established by our founding fathers that support and deliver a superb education because it is essential to the common good. This year, the Chinese government mandated that English be required course in middle school. They are committed to educating the citizenry to do business in the global marketplace. We need to do the same. We need to look beyond our current status and recognize that knowing how to do business in the East, that knowing how to do business in the world will be a determining factor in the prosperity of our children and the success of our nation. Fort Hays State University stands ready to continue to build bridges that connect and educate our world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, distinguished members of the House of Representatives.
Dr. Martin, thank you so very much for your testimony and your full statement as well. I think I mentioned this earlier, as well as everybody else will be made a part of the record. And anything you want to add to it, any extraneous materials. Ms. Zhao.
Dear Congressman Smith and the members of the subcommittee, I'm pleased to speak today about the Chinese government's policy on joint higher education ventures, its mechanisms of controlling them, the Communist Party's presence in these ventures, and the regime's suppression of academic freedom in Chinese universities. China first set the rules for the joint venture higher education programs in 2003. In 2010, China issued the National Plan for Medium and Long-Term Education Reform and the Development that devotes a chapter 16 that is, to these ventures. The purpose of these joint ventures is to bring the best international higher education resources to China. This includes bringing world-class experts and scholars to China to engage in teaching, research, and management, conducting joint research with the best universities in the world on advanced science and technology, and encouraging foreign universities to use their intellectual property as their share of investment in these ventures. When entering WTO in 2001, China promised to open its education sector to foreign universities, allowing, quote, foreign majority ownership, end quote. But China has had no intention to deliver that promise. Instead, it set up joint ventures with the Chinese government being the controlling party. The rules stipulate that the board of these joint ventures must have a Chinese majority, and the president must be a Chinese citizen. Courses and textbooks must be filed with the authorities. These programs must provide courses known as political thought education to the Chinese students. The most insidious part of the control mechanism probably lies in the finance of these joint venture universities. It is also the least transparent part. Financial dependence on the Chinese government, even if it is partial, puts foreign universities in a vulnerable position where they may feel the need to conform to China's expectations, not only on the joint venture campuses, but also on home campuses. The 2000 also joint venture programs in China mostly focused on advanced technology. 37% of them are engineering, while literature, history, and law are less than 2% each. China is also bringing its quest for knowledge to the U.S. soil. Last year, China's elite Tsinghua University, the University of Washington, and the Microsoft launched the Global Innovation Exchange Institute in Seattle that focuses on technology and design innovation. In the Chinese press, this institute was described as, quote, an important step and a milestone of Tsinghua University's international strategic deployment, end quote. China is seeking to invest in the research triangle in North Carolina and also establish innovation platforms elsewhere in the U.S. with the Chinese investment and the research expertise from American universities. Another component of China's strategy is theft. Reports on this abound. For example, in May, Penn State University disclosed that its engineering school had been invaded by Chinese hackers for more than 2 years. Penn State developed sensitive technology for the U.S. Navy. China's intentions are probably best illustrated in 2 incidents involving UC Berkeley. In November 2014, Peking University gave the president of UC Berkeley an honorary professorship and they expressed the desire in, quote, cooperation, end quote, on big data processing technology, which has wide applications. 3 months later, a labor rights center in Guangzhou, jointly established by UC Berkeley and the Sun Yat-sen University, was forced to close as part of a systematic suppression of rights activities in civil society in recent years. Reports in Chinese press confirmed the CCP presence on joint venture campuses as well. From the Ministry of Education's review of joint venture programs in 2014, I quote, "Joint venture universities have established the party committees so that there would be a party organization wherever there are party members, achieving the party's no blind spot coverage on the grassroots level. Some universities have also established the overseas party cells to ensure that the party's work remained synchronized with its work at home when students study abroad," end quote. In China's current political system, there has never been academic freedom as understood by Americans, though the level of repression have fluctuated. Since early 2013, a CCP order known as Document Number 9 have shut down what little academic freedom was enjoyed before. Christian Science Monitor reported recently that professors were fired or pressured to quit their jobs for espousing liberal ideas and teaching them in the classroom. Trips to academic conferences were cut or constrained. Student reading lists were vetted for ideological content. On some campuses, classrooms are monitored by surveillance cameras. Over the last 30 years, the communist regime has benefited enormously from the unprecedented transfer of knowledge from Western countries, much of it through joint business ventures and through theft of intellectual properties. Many such relations have soured in recent years, and the trend is likely to worsen. Now it seems that the Chinese government is duplicating this successful model in higher education while pursuing agenda to stamp out the Chinese people's demand of freedom. I have no problem with the free exchange of knowledge, but I have a problem with the freely providing knowledge to the communist regime and the strengthening its grip on power. I have a problem with our institutions of higher education looking the other way as terrible suppression of freedoms and civil society take place in the country. On a personal level, for the 3 years I have been an activist of human rights in China. All the peoples, have been in jail now. Some of them left the country for political asylum, but almost all of them are in jail. The U.S.-China relationship for the last 3 years has operated on the premise that the U.S. should engage with China, help her grow economically, and the economic development will lead to the Chinese Communist Party's embracing human rights and democratic values. Instead, today we have a monstrous combination of state capitalism, the kleptocratic marriage of power and money, and the broader and harsher suppression of the Chinese people and their legitimate demand for political and civil rights. Internationally, we're witnessing an increasingly aggressive China, a rising threat to the peace and security of the world and the challenge to the existing world order. One can argue about all the defects of the current order, but I assure you with absolute certainty that you do not want a global regime set up and dominated by the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP has mastered the game of taking advantage of a free society like ours. It is sad to see how easily our universities can fall prey to the party scheme. It is my wish that American universities are able to see the full picture, where they fit into it, and what end they're serving when entering joint ventures with the Chinese government. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for your testimony and for your research. Let me just begin the questioning first with Mr. Lehman, if I could. Is it your testimony that the Chinese government officials have no say whatsoever in hiring, firing, promotion of NYU personnel, including your professors and teachers? And when it comes to admissions, how is that determined? For example, can a son or daughter of a dissident be accepted to NYU? What is the cost? What is the tuition, fees, and all when you add it all up together for an academic year for a student? How much of that is paid for by the Chinese government? How much, getting to who actually owns NYU Shanghai? Is it a partnership where 51% is you or them? We just don't know, on this side of this aisle. And, but again, how much of those student fees and tuition is subsidized by the government? And if they don't have a say in who is admitted to NYU, do they just give you the money and then you decide who it is that comes in? I do want to thank you for the invitation offered broadly to members of Congress. I accept. I would very much like if you could provide me with an invitation to speak on human rights. I would love to give a lecture on religious freedom and other human rights issues. This is my 53rd hearing on human rights in China. I've chaired probably close to 500, if not more, human rights hearings covering from human trafficking to forced labor to issues of every kind. The students and professors might find it of some interest, so I would hope if you could extend that to me when we're not in session, I and my staff will be there. Let me also ask you too, and I know I'm throwing a number of questions right out first, but how do you vet NYU teachers there to ensure that the Chinese government, as we all know, is extraordinarily effective in placing people in positions. They do it with business all the time. That keep a very sharp eye on others, those to ensure conformity to what the party wants. How do you ensure that the people you're hiring are not agents or people reporting back and surveilling both other teachers and other personnel as well as the students? Yield.
So thank you, Chairman Smith, and I will try to answer all the questions. If I miss one of them, please feel free to remind me, and I'll do my best. I'll start at the end and the beginning, which was the question about faculty appointments and how they work. So faculty appointments at NYU Shanghai are the same as they are at NYU New York. That is to say, they're led by the provost on our campus, who is Joanna Whaley-Cohen, who is seated behind me today. She was the chairman of the history department at NYU for many years. She's been on the NYU faculty for decades before coming to NYU Shanghai. The process is we announced that we're holding a search. It's a global search, and the search is for the best people in the fields. The searches are done by discipline. Because we're starting out, we don't have a large established faculty in Shanghai, and so we rely on faculty from NYU's campus in New York to help us to conduct the search. The search is all on the academic merits. It's a very rigorous and extensive process. Potential faculty members' publications are reviewed by the search committee. A small group of finalists are then brought in to give what are called job talks, where they have to give a lecture, effectively conduct a class in the way that they should, and then ultimately offers are extended. You can see from Appendix 1 to my testimony the list of the people who are teaching at NYU Shanghai. They're extraordinarily distinguished people. They did their academic training at the finest universities in the world. They did postdocs at the finest universities in the world. We also have visiting faculty from New York. who are members of the National Academy of Sciences, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. This is an extraordinary group of faculty, people who've held endowed chairs at institutions like Cornell and Northwestern University have come to teach with us. The Communist Party has no say. The Chinese government has no say, no voice in this process at all. East China Normal University, which is the partner to NYU in this process, has no voice in this process. Our graduates get degrees from New York University. They get degrees from the trustees of New York University. They do not get degrees from East China Normal University. So NYU is responsible for the education that they receive and the quality that they receive. In terms of the admissions process, again, it's completely controlled by NYU. The process is complex. So half of our students come from China, and the other half come from the rest of the world.
And that's what, about 2,000? What's the number that you'll build out to?
When we're full grown, it will be 2,000 undergraduates, that is to say 500 per year, 250 from China in each entering class, 251 from China in each entering class, 249 from the rest of the world. In the startup period, we've had only 300 students in each entering class, so 151 from China, 149 from the rest of the world. The students who apply from the rest of the world follow a process that's the same as for NYU New York, NYU Abu Dhabi, the common application. They submit essays, they indicate which campus they would like to go to, and they're free to select Shanghai or New York or Abu Dhabi or any two or all three as their preferences, and they can rank what their preferences are. The process is a little bit more intensive than it is in New York because we're small. So our admissions office in New York is able to actually conduct video interviews with finalists who are applicants in New York.
Can I ask you, while you're answering,
Yeah.
can a Falun Gong practitioner be admitted to NYU and also be hired as a professor?
Sure. I mean,
Do you have any?
They could. No, we don't have any. I don't know that we've received any. We don't ask people about their religious preferences when they apply for applications. So,
But you believe you would be free enough that if a Falun Gong practitioner said, this is my expertise, has the academic gravitas to take on that position?
yeah, if they were
you
the
would
most,
be able to do it.
if they were the most qualified applicant, we could hire them. Absolutely.
But is there any fear of self-censorship where you believe that could hurt your standing with the government? You would have no such concerns?
You know, we came on a condition, and the condition was that NYU would be NYU. And the government said, good, that's what we'd like. If they were to change their mind, then we would leave. But so far, so good. You know, as the other witnesses have testified, China is a constantly changing place. And it's as Mr. Daly testified right now, there are mixed signals all around us. We hear different voices all the time. And so we don't know what tomorrow will be like, but I would be very surprised if the government of Shanghai were to say, well, sorry, we don't want you anymore. But they could. That's their prerogative. Conversely, they could try to go partway and say, well, we want you, but you can't have academic freedom. And if they did that, then NYU would leave.
Well, can I ask you then in follow-up?
Sure,
Again, there was a letter dated September 3rd, and I'm sure you've seen it, 2013, to the NYU Board of Trustees, signed by 5 members of the faculty, including Andrew Ross, the president of NYU AAUP. And they wrote, we are obliged to record some grave concerns expressed by our members about the prospects of academic freedom in China and at the new campus. They speak to the 7 silences and whether or not those, and I mentioned it in my opening, you know, universal freedoms, press freedom, and the like, would be able to be spoken about, discussed, inquiry in an unfettered way. And they also said how concerned they were, and this is their words, under such circumstances, self-censorship of instructors and students is certain. They didn't say it's a probability, they said it's certain. How do you respond to that?
Well, they're entitled to their opinion, but that opinion is not correct. That letter was written just as we were starting to begin teaching, and I think it was perhaps appropriate at that time for them to have had some concerns about how things would play out. But as things have played out, we have enjoyed full academic freedom on our campus. And so I don't know all five, I don't recall all five of the signatories to that letter, but certainly one faculty member from New York who was quite vocal in expressing her concerns about how things would play out in Shanghai has taught with us and has gone back and told people, no, there is academic freedom, absolutely, at NYU Shanghai. I would actually direct your attention, there's a blog published by professors called Prof's Blog, and in it there was a submission by a member of our faculty who talked about his course at NYU Shanghai. He's a member of the law school faculty at NYU New York, and he was visiting with us. And in his course, he says, in response to something that he'd read, I could not speak for anyone else at NYU Shanghai, but I myself am teaching exactly what I want with the usual lack of oversight enjoyed by any professor teaching at NYU in Washington Square. In his course, as an example of my unhindered freedom, my course requires the students to compare U.S. and Chinese constitutional rules and concepts, and as background for this comparison, I assign so-called sensitive documents, such as the infamous document number 9. This is the kind of classroom that we have at NYU Shanghai today, and I do believe it's important that we have classrooms like this in order to be true to our mission as NYU.
Just so I'm totally clear, it is your testimony that the 7 taboos or 7 silences, universal values, press freedom, civil society, citizens' rights, criticism of the Communist Party's past, neoliberal economics, and independence of the judiciary can all be taught in an unfettered way on your campus without any fear of retaliation. That's what's happening.
That is my testimony. It is absolutely true. That is the case. And I should say, you know, one of the interesting points about the 7 taboos, one of the, and this is just an example of how complicated China is today. One of them, I think, that you mentioned is on neoliberal economics as a banned topic. If you go in Shanghai to the Xinhua bookstore and look, you'll see a display of 2 of the most prominent books right now there, and one of them is the speeches of Xi Jinping, and the other one next to it is a Chinese translation of a book by Professor Ned Phelps called Mass Flourishing. Professor Phelps is a professor at Columbia University. He won the Nobel Prize in Economics. And Mass Flourishing is about the way in which modern capitalism is essential to enabling humans to flourish in a society that values what he calls vitalism. That's Shanghai today. And so yes, on the one hand, there are these 7 taboos, never given to us, never given to NYU Shanghai, I should say, but I've heard about them. I've never seen them, but I've seen about them referred to widely. So there's that document out there. At the same time, and I should say Premier Li Keqiang has spoken about Mr. Phelps' book and has spoken about its importance. Premier Li Keqiang gave a talk in February in which he talked about Adam Smith's theory of moral sentiments, and it's important to their thinking about how the economy should develop. There are mixed signals everywhere in China today. We at NYU Shanghai operate consistent with our principles, and no one has told us not to.
And not to belabor the point, but how much of a student's costs, total costs, are borne by the government?
Yeah.
Does that have any impact as to how you bring students into, admit students into the school?
So, the tuition for NYU Shanghai is the same as the tuition at NYU in New York. It's about $45,000 per year.
Is that in keeping with other colleges or universities in China? Is that parallel to or far in excess of?
You mean other Chinese universities?
Yes, yes.
Wildly in excess. Wildly in excess of what it is. And I believe that that is reflected in the nature of the education that we provide. The kind of education that we provide is very labor intensive, and it's very expensive. And I believe that it's actually reflected in a difference in the quality of the education that we provide. Now, that level of tuition would be unaffordable to many of the best Chinese students. And therefore, one of the important conditions of opening NYU Shanghai was that there be a subsidy from the government of Shanghai that would enable Chinese students to pay 100,000 renminbi per year, which is about $17,000 instead of $45,000. So that works out to about a $28,000 per student subsidy for all Chinese students, not only ones.
And who actually pays that? The central government or the Shanghai?
Shanghai, City of Shanghai.
City of Shanghai.
City of Shanghai. And so if you look at the overall structure of our budget, as I said, NYU Shanghai is a tub on its own bottom. So no profits are distributed to NYU in New York, and no subsidy is demanded from New York. Our budget is self-contained. So when we're full grown, when we have 2,000 undergraduates, the plan for the budget is that about 60% of the total cost of operating the campus will come from tuition. About 25% will come from government subsidy, and of which about 14% is going to be going, 14 of that 25% is going to be going to financial aid for Chinese students.
But again, the tuition would be 60%.
The
That,
total,
a large part of that is from the government as well, so.
no. This,
Okay.
the 60% is what is sometimes referred to as sticker price tuition. So that's tuition. Financial aid reduces that cost for, it's part of the expenditures against which that operates. So another way to think about it, I guess, would be to say that the total budget will be about $200 million a year, and about 60 million of that, 55 million of that, will be going to financial aid. So that means there's about 145 million left for operating costs. So I'm talking about percentages of the 200. About 60% of that 200 comes from tuition. About 25% will come from government. And the last 15% will come from private philanthropy. And to the extent we operate executive education programs that are able to produce net surplus, that will be part of the last 15%.
Just one final question on the admissions.
Yes.
Are the students the children of the elite? Are they just any child, any young person, I should say, who aspires and has the academic credentials to make it? And when the decisions are made by your local board, are there Chinese nationals on that board who are influencing this, or is it done exclusively by NYU coming out of New York?
Exclusively by NYU.
New York, I mean...
NYU, New York. I mean, we have local staff.
Getting to my questions about the vetting before, who are the local staff? I mean, how do you know they're not clandestinely part of the government apparatus?
Well, I could be wrong, I suppose. I mean, I'm not experienced at spotting
to
spies.
shell out $28,000 equivalent of in U.S. dollars, you would think the government would want to have a main say in who it is that gets admitted.
I don't believe so. The mission here is for us to have the best and the brightest in China studying with us. So we have students who turn down Peking University, turn down Tsinghua University, turn down Fudan, turn down Berkeley, turn down Cornell, for the opportunity to be a part of this very special academic experience. The concern, both at NYU and honestly by the city of Shanghai, was that at $45,000 a year, it would simply be a playground for children of the rich, and that would not be acceptable. So it was necessary from the beginning to structure this to make NYU Shanghai affordable. Now, some students can't afford 100,000 renminbi either, and so we have need-based financial aid as well, in addition to sort of the flat reduction to 100,000 RMB. The process, we have thousands and thousands of applicants from all across China for these 150 seats. And so the process that is followed is they send us their high school grades, their letters of recommendations from principals, their essays, and that written portfolio is reviewed first by our staff in Shanghai, then by our staff in New York, and a group of about 500, the top 500, are invited to come to our campus for what we call Candidate Day. And in Candidate Day, they're in batches of 125. They have one-on-one interviews with us. They have sample classes. They write essays. We want to be sure that they're ready to study in the kind of academic environment that we provide, that their English is good enough. And after that Candidate Day process, we then identify the top 150 or so, to whom we extend conditional offers of admission. Now, the condition is that they then have to take this Chinese examination known as the Gaokao, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is the national admissions exam in China. They then have to score in the top tier on the Gaokao in order for their offer of admission actually to be effective. Almost all of them do, but every year, unfortunately, some of them do not. This process, I will say, Chairman Smith, I have complete confidence in. It is not an ideological screen. It is not controlled by the government. You asked to speculate why the government would give us money to subsidize this if they don't get to control admissions. You know, most of our financial...
Or even influence, not necessarily...
Or even influence admissions. I'll give two partial answers to that. Most of our financial aid in the United States at American universities is underwritten by donors, by private philanthropists who make gifts. And that accounts for the ability to give financial aid. And the question is, why do they make these gifts if they don't get to influence who they're supporting? And the idea is there is a sense that you are doing good if you are opening up access on the basis of merit rather than on the basis of financial capacity. And I honestly believe that that is a big part of the motivation here. Separately, I would say, because we are so small, if there were ways for the government to influence who came, to say, okay, you know, there's a special side door for children of privilege, that would destroy our reputation in China immediately. I mean, word would get around in a flash. The social media in China today are an unbelievably powerful force. And we're, Mr. Daley spoke about the comments about Minister Yuan's comment, alleged comment. And I think everyone in China knows that this is all very, very visible. And so, again, we haven't received that kind of effort to influence yet. But if it were to come, we will be vigilant.
Can I ask you, Dr. Martin, did you receive that kind of subsidy or anything close to it?
No, sir. Our program is a little bit different, obviously, because it is an undergraduate program conducted at two universities. CS University, as shared earlier, is a private university, whereas SNU is a public university. Normally, students who come to the campuses pay for their degree. As you know, there are two types of students in China: those who are term planned, which, as was stated earlier, achieve a certain high percentage in the Gaokao examination, and then those who are unplanned, which mean that they did not fall within the auspices of those examinations. The planned students are subsidized normally by the government, whereas the unplanned are not. And so for many who are unplanned students at the private universities, the education and the degree that they obtain through the courses and the program at Fort Hays State University is their only chance to have access to an education in China.
You know, any of our distinguished witnesses, if you want to chime in or speak out on anything you hear, please. Yes, Ms. Allen.
I just want to add a few points because I was the one who did this research on NYU Shanghai, what's the deal, in February. So I know a few things from the, almost all my sources are from the Chinese language sources when I posted this, and several NYU faculties wrote me thinking it's very, very helpful, and the fact that they knew it's a joint venture, but what it means really was lost on most of the faculty members at NYU here. Now, just pick on Professor Lehman's comments. I want to point out, at least at the early stage, at least that may or may not be the case now, that at least at the very early stage, NPR, when the Shanghai campus opened in 2013, right? NPR had the article interviewed half dozen also American students. All of them receive generous tuition from NYU Shanghai. And some were even paid with their plane tickets. So where does that money come from? All of them were given huge tuition fees that cost, let me read from the original NPR report, worth one of the students were offered a deal worth US dollar 228,000. That's huge. And the quote, NPR report, quote, the half dozen others with whom NPR spoke said that they got either generous discounts or free tuitions. So that's one comment I want to make. Another comment is about the philanthropy part of NYU Shanghai. There was an article I find in Chinese that described this newly found foundation called Education Development Foundation at the NYU Shanghai. NYU President Sexton referred to the three distinguished people on this foundation. And I was amazed to find that two of them were high-ranking Chinese party officials, retired, and these officials in the Chinese culture, parlance, they're called 退居二线的干部, which means communist cadets working on the second front, meaning that they work in the non-government sector to exert government control. So I just find the word philanthropy is misleading in here, because where does the money come from? It could still come from the government, even it's labeled as fundraising philanthropy. I don't know. I'm just saying, because this foundation is led by former high-ranking officials. One of them was a former member of the CCP Central Committee. That's a very, very high ranking. I mean, you have what, over 1,000, few hundred CCP Central Committee members across the country. I mean, so that's and also just on a more playful note, the more the Chinese elite privileged kids, guess what? They don't want to go to NYU Shanghai. They all come here to Harvard, to Princeton, to UPenn, and they come here. So that's my comments. Thanks.
If I could, Mr. Lehman, maybe ask you another question, whether or not discussions about, and this would, Dr. Martin, this would be to you as well, and any others would like, can there be a robust discussion about the Dalai Lama? I led the congressional effort to nominate Liu Xiaobo, Chen Guangzhen, to get the Nobel Peace Prize. Went there when they had the big empty chair, which is one of the most heartbreaking scenes ever. And of course, Liu Xiaobo's wife is not doing very well, and she is under a kind of house arrest. Here's the Nobel Peace Prize winner. We're going to hold another hearing on Liu Xiaobo very soon to try to keep the focus on a Nobel Peace Prize winner who was languishing in prison. And my question would be, can you discuss his work? Can you do it, Dr. Martin, as well? And Mr. Daly, you want to speak to this, or anyone else? And again, in an unfettered way, because, I mean, the crackdown there was so complete. They even threatened the Nobel Peace Prize Committee and the host country for having the audacity to raise his issue, as they did so well in nominating him or selecting him. Let me also ask, with regards to religious freedom, can Bible studies exist? Can, again, Falun Gong practitioners engage in their spiritual exercise on campus? Internet freedom, we know how the internet is absolutely abridged by the Great China Firewall that's in place. So again, your students, I'm not sure there's much anyone can do about that except if we keep the pressure on worldwide, but they are getting a very filtered set of facts and information via the internet. But let me ask you as well, in 1983, 84, I offered the First Amendment that passed the U.S. House of Representatives on the greatest human rights violation of women's rights ever, in my opinion, and that is the egregious one-child per couple policy that makes brothers and sisters illegal. It requires forced abortion by policy. There has been talk since 1985 that it's relaxing, and it never seems to bear fruit. It is usually proffered for international consumption and to garner a headline somewhere that somehow they're relaxing the policy. And frankly, with the implosion that is imminent in China because of the missing girls, we had a hearing just a few weeks ago, and the number of missing daughters is incalculable. There might be as many as 100 million or more, leading to sex trafficking and a disproportionality of males to females that's causing huge problems for the country. Hopefully the government realizes their self-interest in eliminating such a ban on children, making children illegal. And then, you know, I asked in this room, the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, when she was visiting with a delegation from China, how they deal with the fact that 600 women per day commit suicide. Nowhere else in the world is female suicide more than male, except China. And the fact that there is such a terrible, terrible toll, and a lot of it, we don't know how much, but that comes from the Centers for Disease Control. Theirs, not ours. They challenged my number. We brought down the facts and figures, and she walked out, and that was the end of that conversation. You know, that is a loss of women's lives that is, again, unparalleled anywhere else in the world. 600 per day. And my question would be, with regards to the one-child per couple policy, and Dr. Martin as well, in one of my trips to China, I asked a number of businesses whether or not they were implementing the one-child per couple policy, whether or not workers can snitch, and that's the word they use, on a woman who was pregnant without the birth-permitted coupon and authorization given by the government. And most of the businesses told me yes. These are American businesses. Some didn't know what I was talking about, but those that did said, you know, sadly, it's part of Chinese law, and we follow it. And I'm wondering, what happens to an unwed mother in one of your students And again, they're not even allowed one child. All unwed mothers are compelled to abort or face ruinous fines. What is the university or the college's response to that? Are you in any way complicit in enforcing the one-child per couple policy? Do you have a health clinic? My hope is that you're in no way involved, directly or indirectly, but what is the case on with regards to that?
So we are in no way involved. We have a clinic on campus. It's a health and wellness area. It's very popular with our students. The mission of the health and wellness clinic is not to enforce the one-child policy. We're not charged with enforcing or implementing the one-child
But
policy.
if a woman is, or a young student is pregnant, how does that get, I mean, we have had, we've worked, I have personally, as well as my staff, on many cases of women who had a second-order baby, and you know, including talking to the ambassador, traveling to Beijing, you know, just to say, please, cease and desist. Don't kill that baby simply because the authorization wasn't given out. What does the clinic do? Do they inform government officials? Do they try to hide it?
So our clinic does not provide abortion services. To my knowledge, none of our students have gotten pregnant. If one of our students got pregnant, we would have absolutely no role in enforcing the one-child policy. We're not an arm of the government, Chairman Smith. We're a university.
Oh, I understand, but my hope would be that you wouldn't, I mean, that woman is immediately at risk, and she will be forcibly aborted. And a student, there's a, you know, most obviously marriages are not even allowed to occur until 25. I read your statement of labor values. You have a section on protecting women's rights.
Yes.
And my hope was, you know, you do put in, provided by PRC law, should be protected, talking about pregnancy, childbirth. But again, the dark side of Chinese law when it comes to women and children is, one of them, is this terrible one-child per couple policy. If you could check to see what happens if a woman presents, same way with Dr. Martin, so that we are in no way complicit. You know, already.
I will
Because that
certainly
is,
check,
you know,
Chairman
there's a
Smith.
child's life and a mother's life at risk there.
I will check and confirm that we are in no way.
That would be
complicit.
very good. I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, unlike NYU, of course, you realize that Fort Hays State University partners with the institutions. So the program is owned in its totality by the institution, but it's delivered on a host campus, so to speak. So there are other students on that campus. As a matter of fact, CS International University has about 30,000 students on its campus, and only a very small minority of those students are actually part of the program. So to the extent that the communications take place within our faculty and our students, their ability to discuss anything has never had been an issue. The scholarship, their willingness and ability to discuss things, as you have discussed, from the Bill of Rights all the way up to more sensitive issues, never have we encountered any opposition by any of the government. And to that extent, one of the things that we feel very privileged to be able to do is to expand the mind of these students. You know, I said to somebody the other day, if you understand why people do what they do, and you understand the human nature of people, then you're able to put them in context and not judge them as bad or good, but rather create a system whereby you can expand your view of the world. And that's what our faculty tried to do in China, and they do it very well. And addressing your statement about spiritual or religious freedom, they are very well able to practice their religion. Clearly, there's not a Catholic church that they can go into in their neighborhood, but they're able to practice their religion within their own homes.
Before going to Mr. Sherman, I do have some other questions that I'll finish with, but under the number 5, protecting women's rights, NYU's statement on labor values, it says women's rights during pregnancy, childbirth, and nursing period will be protected as provided by PRC law. That's the problem, the PRC law, which is outrageously unethical, immoral, and out of any human rights norms, even according to UN principles, Cairo population, ICBD, or anything else, because it's forced, it's coerced, and so what does that mean as provided by PRC law in your statement?
So I wasn't part of the drafting of that, but my understanding, at least the way I understand it, is under Chinese law, after you give birth, you're entitled to paid leave, and I don't know, I think it may be 4 months, and so I think this is guaranteed paid leave.
But it does say during pregnancy as well. You know, PRC law during pregnancy makes that child at the gravest risk of extermination anytime during their life on the planet.
So I believe, Chairman Smith, that that provision is intended. I think it's framed in terms of protecting the rights of the woman, I believe, and so I think what that is intended to do is to say, to the extent that Chinese law creates a floor under the rights of the woman, those will absolutely be respected. And that is not only by NYU Shanghai, but by anyone who deals with NYU Shanghai.
Okay,
And
but
so-
again, we're
and
talking,
so-
rights of the women here would be coercive population control, including forced sterilization and forced abortion, which is so egregious at Nuremberg, at the Nazi War Crimes Tribunal, it was construed to be a crime against humanity, which it is.
Yes.
Twice the U.S. Congress has called it a crime against humanity. So my point is, if you could clarify that for us, that would be, you know, what do you mean by that? Because if it just means enforcing, and this is what I've gotten from many businesses operating in China, well, it's what we got from Google when we talked about the issue of censorship, a different issue, of course,
Right.
that they were just following law as promulgated by
So,
PRC.
so the point of this statement of labor values, and it's comparable to the one that I believe was praised by Human Rights Watch as it was applied in Abu Dhabi. The point of this is to ensure that workers on projects associated with NYU Shanghai have their labor rights respected and enforced. And you're pointing at number 5, I believe it's 13 paragraphs, is that right?
14.
14 paragraphs of rights in different areas. And the point is to say that in each of these areas, including worker safety, including guarantees that they'll be paid, that their rights will be respected and enforced. Because sometimes, as you know, in many countries, including in China, there will be times when there are rights on paper that are not respected.
But it is precisely at the workplace where the one shop or cup of policy is implemented. So whether these be contractors or whatever, that's the point of contact where they have their greatest means of compliance, and that's where the snitches come in, fellow workers who are rewarded or penalized if they do not bring to the attention of the family planning cadres that so-and-so is pregnant without being given the ability, without getting the authorization from the government.
Yes, Chairman Smith, I understand. We'll get back to you with more.
So that would be both from the workers' point of view as well as from the students and
Yes,
faculty.
exactly.
Mr. Sherman.
Yes, thank you. I'd point out that while fining a woman for having a child seems a deprivation of human rights, Mr. Lehman points out that in other cases, China provides 4 months of paid leave. A woman seeking 4 months off in the United States faces a fine equal to 4 months' pay. So I look, well,
New Jersey.
everywhere in the United States, there is no paid maternity. There's paid maternity leave in New Jersey?
State government.
Oh, if you're an employee of the state government. Okay, well, the vast majority of my constituents are not employees of any government, and I'm sure that's it's good to see the state is generous to its own employees. It'd be nice to see how we can work that out for all employees. Let's see. Mr. Lehman, if one of your students is sitting in your library in Shanghai and they Google Tiananmen Square in 1989 and they do it on Google.com, what do they see? Do they see what I see, or do they see what everybody else in Shanghai sees?
They see what you see.
So you get around the Great Firewall of China.
We are part of NYU's global network.
Gotcha.
And so in order for us to work...
Let me move on to... Ms. Lawrence, first, thank you so much for all the guidance you provide to my staff and myself. Second, how much money is China throwing into these Confucian institutes here in the United States or otherwise in order to give free services, professorial and otherwise, or cash to U.S. universities? Is this a big thing?
I'm afraid I don't have a number. I could,
I mean, are there a dozen or several dozen professors fully paid by the Chinese government here in the United States?
My understanding is that usually the Chinese, the Hanban, which is the organization in China that manages Confucius Institutes, provides a certain amount of money per Confucius Institute to get it set up.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be anywhere from, it can be up to, I think, about $500,000, somewhere between $100,000 and $500,000, but I think it depends on the university. Robert may have more information there, actually.
Well, in addition to those arrangements, you're right that the Hanban has also started to propose endowed professorships to universities. The test case on this a few years ago.
So this would be the chair in...
chair, a faculty member,
okay.
whatever.
They would then, okay, these faculty would teach the 9-dash line is...
this was the test case was in Stanford a few years ago. In fact, I testified in 2011 before Congressman Rohrabacher's committee on this. And there was a fight at Stanford. There was concern because the faculty got a say about the constraints that the Chinese side would put either on the specialty of the faculty member or teaching. Stanford won that argument, and they took the money for the chair sans conditions, and it was all designed by Stanford University, and the money still came through.
I know at least one
faculty.
major university's turned down the money or pulled out because, presumably because they didn't get that. Mr. Lehman, you suggested that the federal government pay money to U.S. students at your university and elsewhere. All I can say is nice try. This would be basically a lottery ticket in the sense that there are 1 million American students that would want it, and 5 or 10 would get it. And I'm not going to cut cancer research in order to send you students. You're going to have to get those on your own. Let's see, Ms. Lawrence, Chinese students studying here in the United States, are they studying STEM, science and technology, engineering, math, or are they studying business, or what? Kind of give a vague breakdown. Humanities versus business, business law versus...
Well, traditionally, the Chinese students coming to the United States in the early wave of students came to do graduate study and often were studying STEM subjects in part because they didn't require such strong language abilities that if you were studying mathematics, you didn't have to have incredibly fluent.
Well, what do we see now?
But now we're moving into an era where there are many Chinese students now starting to come over actually at the undergraduate level too. I was recently in Beijing and hearing that one of the best high schools in Beijing, the Renda Fuzhong.
But you may have heard the exchange with Mr. Rohrabacher. If they're here learning the technology that will strengthen China, that's one thing. If they're here learning American values, that's something else. Are they here reading the works of Chairman Smith on human rights in a humanities course, or are they here learning how to beat us at technology?
I think that now the new wave of students who are coming not just at the graduate level, but now also at the undergraduate level, I think they're starting to study rather more diverse subjects than the first.
And what
wave.
about the institutes that we're basically focusing on in these hearings, the U.S. campuses the Chinese campuses of U.S. universities? Are they teaching STEM, or are they teaching business and law, or are they teaching the humanities, or all of, mostly one, mostly the other?
So there's a wide range of models for these U.S. universities that are operating in China. So NYU Shanghai is one model, and it's a joint campus. It's a joint venture between NYU and East China Normal University, with East China Normal University as the majority partner, and it's providing a liberal arts education. There are a great many more Chinese. That's a very small number. There are 3 U.S. universities that have been given this independent legal person status, which Vice Chancellor Lehman could explain more what the implications of that status are. There are only 13 institutions in China that U.S. partnered institutions that China recognizes and approves as collaborative education institutions. But there are more than 100 other U.S. universities that are involved in offering degree programs on Chinese campuses. And so it kind of varies depending on the model, but I would say that the bulk of the degrees that are being offered by U.S. institutions in China, a lot of them are business, engineering degrees, some English degrees. There are a few unusual degrees. There's one U.S. university that's offering a music degree. There's another U.S. university that's offering a dance degree. But for the most part, it's more STEM, business.
Chancellor Lehman, if I got you right, you testified that you're not aware of any of your students being pregnant. That's the first time a chancellor of a non-all-male university has ever said that here in Congress. Obviously, then you're not focused on that. But the chancellor of UCLA has never said that. I'll ask Ms. Lawrence first, but perhaps others as well. What does the Chinese government do to insulate the students that it sends to the United States from the wrongful influences of those who would want to break the pots of the Chinese Communist Party? What do they do to prevent the students they send here from bringing back American political values?
I mean, I think there are a lot of Chinese government does encourage a lot of students now to come and study in the United States. There are Chinese student groups on a lot of campuses which have very close relationships with the Chinese embassy, the Chinese consulates.
Are they spying on the Chinese students and what they're saying and doing?
I wouldn't know whether they are spying on them, but I think what those groups, they do coordinate with the embassy. You see when major Chinese leaders are visiting, often there will be groups organized by these Chinese student groups to take Chinese students studying in the U.S. to come and join welcome parades and that sort of thing for visiting officials.
Let me ask, Ms. Cao, if someone was interested in commemorating the events of Tiananmen Square in 1989, would it be wise for them not to cause the Chinese Students Organization described by Ms. Lawrence take steps so that they wouldn't be aware of that effort? Or would you walk into one of these Chinese student groups with a big Remember Tiananmen badge on and feel just comfortable?
You will feel uncomfortable. There are evidence of that. There are incidents of that. And the students, Chinese students, Chinese associations of Chinese students and scholars on larger American campuses like Columbia University's, MIT, and these, there are strong evidence supporting showing that there's a very close cooperation and influence from the Chinese consulates and embassies. And in UK, in Cambridge, there was an example. Well, I can only quote the examples that's in the paper. That's how we get to know.
Right.
But I have no reason to assume that's an isolated incident. Now, a couple years ago, in Cambridge University, the university authorities actually canceled the Chinese Student Association because of the Chinese embassy's influence on who will become the president of that association, because these associations are called on, for example, when Chinese leaders are visiting, they're called on to wave the flags, and they're paid the meal and money to do that. And when the Tibetans are protesting, these students are organized, these associations at the behest of the embassy or consulate are going to do the countering protest, things like that. And there are a lot of incidents like that.
And Ms. Lawrence, if you're an agent of a foreign government or paid by a foreign government, aren't you supposed to register? I realize that we heard a description of what went on in England, but assuming that there are Chinese student organizations being subsidized by and the officers being selected by the Chinese embassy, should those students be registering as agents of the PRC?
I have to refer you to another branch of CRS which handles U.S. domestic law. I focus on China.
Okay,
So I'm afraid I'm not
get those
familiar
folks,
with the
get those folks to give us an answer.
Sure.
I don't know who else. Yeah, Ms. Cao, you have a.
Just a few weeks ago, very recent, the Chinese Student Association at Columbia University was shut down by the university. And the reason they gave is that, well, they broke some law, broke some rules. And I recently, just last week, I talked to a Reuters reporter. I urged him to dig deeper because I believe it's likely, very likely, there's something else. Not just the leaving food after their events or some things like that. I think a university...
That is so unusual at an American university. If you were to shut down the Albanian students' organizations
That's
at UCLA,
why
the whole campus would erupt. Mr. Daly, what can U.S. campuses do to ensure that Chinese students are not only protected from this intimidation or observation, but are actually encouraged to break the pots of the Chinese Communist Party?
They can do very little directly. There have always been organized attempts.
Well, let's back up a bit. They send the kids here to study STEM. Can we require at all our universities, if you're here to study STEM, you have to take one or two courses where you may read the
American
writings?
universities all have distribution requirements. They have general education requirements. What American campuses can do is be American campuses. Where is our confidence? Yes, there are attempts by the consulates and the embassies to infiltrate.
So you don't
cells.
have U.S. universities saying, "Hey, we really want the Chinese money. We'll let students come here. We'll give them some sort of certificate. They can take nothing but math and
American
science."
universities provide the opportunity, the environment, and all of the stimuli that are the best antidote to everything the Chinese Communist Party is
they're
attempting
willing
to do.
to provide programs designed with the interests of the PRC in mind. Are there universities that, regardless of the breadth requirements they have for their U.S. students, either have some certificate program or degree program designed to teach STEM to Chinese students without exposing them? I see Dr. Martin is saying no. Are you? I realize no for your own campus. Does that apply to every campus you're aware of? Is there any university in this country that is saying, come here, bring your Chinese dollars, study math and science and technology, and you can leave, and you don't have to take a course in politics, humanities, anything like that?
And sir, I don't have the vast knowledge to be able
But have you heard
to
of any such
answer.
example?
However, every single institution of higher education is governed and accredited by a regional accrediting body to whom we have to answer. And as such, we provide this accrediting body a list of all of our programs, and they approve it. Within those programs, as was stated earlier, there are the general education programs that include your English, your sciences, your mathematics, your humanities, your social
So there is no
sciences.
certificate somebody can earn without those breadth requirements?
A certificate is a specialized series of courses in a specific area. And so the question, the the answer would be, certainly it could be designed, but I am not aware, it wouldn't be a degree.
Let me just make a comment. I am concerned with Chinese money influencing American thought. I think the number one problem is the corporate sector, where hundreds of billions of dollars are made, and lobbyists for the benefit of China descend upon this place and descend upon the media, particularly the business cable channels, with an amount of power that far exceeds our influence in China. I know some of you said, we've got the soft power way beyond what they do. That's true if you just ignore money, lobbying, and the effect of money on cable television and think tanks. If you just ignore money and focus only on the academia, then you would say that we've got the soft power and they don't. And then finally, as I mentioned, when China controls a big chunk of the movie theaters in the United States, they control or influence what studios will choose to make. And those of you who are looking for a second gear movie on Tibet will have to look at just some movie that's like made for cable. It will not be a theatrical run. With that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for these hearings, and I know that you have some additional questions.
Mr. Sherman? Yeah, I'm almost
Mr. Chairman, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
If I could just say something. While I am not able to speak on behalf of every single institution of higher education as to what course of study they may or may not have, or what certificate they may or may not have, I believe that I can indeed, though, speak on behalf of every institution in this country to the fact that the academic integrity of our programs highlight and dictate who we are as an academic institution. And speaking for them, and certainly on behalf of Fort Hays State University, no amount of money will ever be able to be given to me to sacrifice the name or the credibility of my institution or those of higher education in the United States. Thank you.
Just a couple of final questions, and again, I thank you for the generosity of your time as well this afternoon. You know, Mr. Lehman, and I'm encouraged when you say the 7 taboos, there's not a concern. I think I'm concerned that surveillance can be very, very ubiquitous. It could be everywhere. When Frank Wolf and I made our way over to the PRC, to Beijing, immediately prior to the Olympics, we brought with us a prisoners list that the China Commission, which I chair, had put together, I should say, and a very extensive list, as you know, that really goes to great depth as to one of the best prisoners lists I've ever seen. It's updated, constantly combed to make sure that it's accurate. And while Frank and I were, Mr. Wolf, Congressman Wolf and I were in the embassy van, it's the only time we talked about this, we talked about kiddingly going to Tiananmen Square, because we were on our way to another meeting, and unfurling a banner that called for human rights. 20 minutes to 25 minutes later, the U.S. Embassy got a phone call saying that if Smith and Wolf unfurl the human rights banner at Tiananmen Square, which was a fiction, we were talking to each other, and we did make one phone call in which we mentioned it as well. We would be immediately escorted to the airport or worse, and the embassy was very concerned. This is right before a big showcase, Olympics, and the ability to embed surveillance equipment and the like in the classroom when the embassy van may have been compromised. I don't know that, but my own and my subcommittee's PC, or our computers, I should say, have been compromised at least once by the PRC that hacked into it. So I am concerned about, when someone does go beyond or says Tiananmen Square. I mean, Chu Ha-tien, as we all remember, when he came into town during President Clinton's tenure in office, was given a 19-gun salute. He was the butcher of Beijing, as you know, was the operational commander, and then at that point, when he was in town, was the defense minister. He said nobody died at Tiananmen Square. We put together a hearing 2 days later. We had people who were there on the square, including correspondents, and someone from the People's Daily who said people died, and they died by large numbers. I mean, the ability of this government in Beijing to do unbelievably nefarious things and to lie in broad daylight and not, I mean, here he was in Washington at the Army War College saying nobody died at Tiananmen Square. I thought Mr. Clinton did a terrible thing in honoring him. He should have been on his way to The Hague for crimes against humanity, but that's said. So I am concerned, and I completely accept your sincerity and the fact that, as a very learned man, you believe this is the case, and I absolutely hope it's true. But I do want to ask you a question. The whole episode with Chen Guangcheng, and Jerry Cohen was one of my witnesses earlier on, so it's not like I have any animus towards NYU, and I want that clear and unmistakable. But as we move towards, and we held hearings, like I said, I had worked on his case for about 5 years when he first was put behind bars. And the way that I was treated, who cares? The way Chen was treated was what really concerned me. But even as he was flying into Newark International Airport, huge efforts, including Secretary Kennedy, who I was on the phone with, ensured that I did not meet him at the airport. He was ushered when he came in. We were at the gate, and I know because the airport, the Port of Authority, used to be my intern, the guy that runs it, or who ran it then. He couldn't believe the great lengths that were in hoops being jumped through to ensure that my wife and I were not there at the gate to greet him. I thought it was a bit bizarre, frankly, but that said, we made our way over to NYU. I was pushed to the side, and I mean literally brought to the side by someone working for NYU. And if it wasn't for Chai Ling yelling as he got out of the van, "Chris Smith is here," he perked up and walked over to the direction of what she said, and I shook his hand, and that was the end of it, and I was shunted to the side again. The meetings that we had with him were always, particularly in the early days, and we tried hard to have meetings, it was like hostile, and I was bewildered by it, and I mean bewildered. Then I heard from Mr. Chen, how he repeatedly, was admonished, maybe threatened, but admonished, maybe a kinder word, about coming to Washington, testifying before our committee. He never got the answer from the administration or from anyone else about the agreement, which turns out probably was just oral, was never written, with the Chinese government about looking into his case. So more subterfuge there. And then when he came down, as I said in my opening and before, to an event that we suggested with Speaker Pelosi, former Speaker Pelosi, and Speaker Boehner, which I think was a great success, that was frowned upon. And then he was told the day after he testified here, and it took almost a year to get him here because of these obstacles, that he was gone. And then, whether it be Lech Walesa or Nelson Mandela or any other world-class human rights leader, not to treat Chen with that kind of the respect. I mean, if it was my university, you're here for as long as you want to be. And he was even told, see what your right-wing friends like Smith can do. And thankfully, I was able to, with phone calls, within an hour of his ouster, or information about his ouster, to set up for him to become part of a three-part sponsorship, including Catholic University of America, the Lantos Foundation, and the Rutherford Institute. So it's been a very strange episode. I mean, I don't have the answers for it. I read his book. He had concerns about how he was treated, especially by the U.S. government. So a very specific question, and it's done in the hopes of just clearing the air. Did the PRC officials in any way pressure, advise, or convey any message to NYU personnel concerning Chen Guangcheng's case? And if so, how were those messages conveyed? And was Chen's situation perceived by NYU as a threat to the NYU's Chinese programs, including its Shanghai campus? I know that he was admonished many times not to go into certain directions. I mean, he was incarcerated and tortured, as was his wife, because he brought up the one-child per couple policy, and in Lingley he tried to defend women who were being horribly abused, and to suggest he ought to talk about corruption and rule of law generically and esoterically without getting into details was, again, mind-boggling. You wouldn't say to Nelson Mandela, by the way, don't bring up apartheid. You just wouldn't do it. That's why he was singled out for punishment. And again, so if you could answer that question, I would appreciate it.
So the simple answer to the question is no. The Chinese government did not attempt to influence NYU's dealings with Mr. Chen. I should say, I was in China at the time. I was not in New York. No one spoke to me ever.
But that's just you. I'm talking about NYU personnel.
NYU personnel in general, I mean, I will say it should be remembered that when Mr. Chen sought refuge in the embassy in Beijing, and Harold Koh was there and was working to trying to find a solution so that he could leave China. To my knowledge, NYU was the only university that offered a fellowship to Mr. Chen to enable him to leave. Other universities were approached and they refused. And this was at the time that NYU Shanghai was being negotiated. This was before there was any agreement to create NYU Shanghai. And so NYU was not worried about the possibility that they might lose the NYU Shanghai. This was not a motivating factor at all.
With total respect, at that point, I agree completely. It was as he came here and as his time in the United States began to unfold that the pressure seems to have been applied.
You know, I don't believe there was any pressure applied. I've spoken with people who worked with I've never met Mr. Chen, but I've spoken with people who worked with him. I've spoken with people who worked closely with him while he was here. None of them ever felt any pressure whatsoever, and I believe, Chairman Smith, if NYU Shanghai was being used as a lever, I would have been told.
Okay. Would anybody else like to say anything before we conclude?
Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to quickly make, because this matters a lot, the internet freedom on these campuses. My research on the Chinese sources, my impression is that the situation varies from campus to campus. On a campus like NYU Shanghai, where you have half of the students are American students, it may very well be the case that they have a free access to internet. But I just read the article on Hong Kong's Mingbao that reported that on the Shenzhen campus of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, the Hong Kong University invested the capability of using their own VPN, which is completely free, like on their Hong Kong campus, but the university, the students in the end were not allowed to use the Hong Kong University's VPN. Instead, they have a domestic VPN that has the Great Firewall of China. So my guess is that from these joint programs, their internet freedom probably varies. If the student body is entirely Chinese, the likelihood is that they won't have complete internet freedom.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank you for your leadership, your generosity. This has been a long hearing. And without objection, I would ask that Dr. Darwood Farhari, the president of Kane University's testimony be included in the record. We did invite Dr. Farhari to be here. We will invite him again for a future hearing, but without objection, his statement will be made included in the record. This hearing is adjourned, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.